This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, to yet another edition of Open Mic Night. I'm your host, Noah Taluki, and on this episode, we're going to break down yet another loss. Saints beating the Lions 35-29 in yet another double-digit lead blown by the Lions. We'll break that down for you. Also, want to get into some very interesting Dan Orlovsky comments that were said on ESPN earlier on Monday. And also, when will Patricia and Quinn be gone? Are they going to be gone this season, in the middle here after the bye? Are they going to be gone next season? We'll discuss more. And also, I kind of have a solution to why this Lions defense is not performing like they should. And later on, we're going to be joined by our good friend of the podcast, Matt Dery, host of Locked On Lions. We'll get his opinion on this team right now. It'll be an interesting talk. So a lot to discuss, and I am just furious. I don't know about you Lions fans out there, but this makes me so upset and so angry to see my football team go up 14-0, have a lot of hope, and then just completely just crumble, giving up 35 straight points to the Saints. I mean, unbelievable. It's mind-boggling to me how this team cannot figure out how to keep leads. And a lot of that has to do with coaching. You look at the NFL, right? You look at all the talent that's out in the league. Most teams are, for the most part, pretty even with talent. There's some teams that have way above average talent, maybe like the Chiefs. And then there's some teams with very below average talent, maybe like the Jets or something. But for the most part, everybody has at least some sort of talent in this NFL. The thing that separates the good teams from the bad teams, a lot of it has to do with coaching. And right now, Matt Patricia and company are not doing their job of coaching this football team in order to be successful. And I'm getting very, very upset with this. I gave them a chance. I've been giving them a chance for a long time. But now I'm done. I'm done with this coaching staff. I'm done with this regime. I've given them all the chances I can. I don't care if we win the rest of our games. I want these guys gone. I want them gone. I get how they're trying to build something and all that, but they've already done it. They've already tried. It's over. The experiment is over, Sheila. It's time to pull the plug, move on, and get other people in here because we have way too much talent, especially offensively, where we shouldn't be losing all these games. Saints running for 164 yards, 41-year-old quarterback Drew Brees just lighting us up in the air. I mean, come on. How worse can it get? The defense still cannot stop the run. And that bugs me because we just get pounded and pounded on and just cannot get after the quarterback. I mean, it's just crazy how poor this defense is and how we just keep losing games because of this. I mean, it just bugs me. It bugs me as a diehard Lions fan to see all this and see all the hype that comes up this season, and then all of a sudden it just comes crashing down and we're 1-3. It just makes me sick. Anyways, Dan Orlovsky, former Detroit Lion, who is an excellent ESPN analyst, he actually made some very interesting comments on that morning show. I think it's called Get Up or something like that, where he talked about Matt Patricia's comment from the game last night from Michael Rothstein of ESPN for the Lions. Quote, "When I came to Detroit, there was a lot of work to do. You're 10-25. You've blown double-digit leads in now 1/3 of your games. So that's 36 games in 1/3 of those. So if we do the math, 12. 12 of those games, he's blown double-digit leads. Said, when I came to Detroit, there was a lot of work to do. Orlovsky didn't necessarily agree with that. He had talked about the Caldwell years and how Caldwell had built a great rapport and a great culture with his players, and he had a winning record total in his 4 seasons in Detroit, and how he doesn't agree with any of what Patricia had to say about that because the culture was there. It was just about enhancing it, but instead he's made it a lot worse. And then they fire Jim Caldwell. Bob Quinn brings his own guy in, and he tries to get from that 9-7 is not okay to maybe like the 12-4, 13-3 level, and then it's completely backfired. And now we're back to, Matt Millen years, in the 2000s. All right. So I found this interesting because does it make Patricia look bad when he says that? Yeah, and especially to Lions fans who are really complaining about this team and guys like Orlovsky who played under Caldwell and all that. Personally, I don't think this is as big of a deal as some people are making it out as, because there was a lot of work to do for him in terms of changing the culture and making it his own. That doesn't necessarily mean it's good, but I think he meant it in a different context than what Orlovsky thought it was. I think work in his context meant that they were really bad and they were trying to get really good. Whereas I think with Patricia, they were already good. They were already a good football team, but he just wanted to change it so that it could be his culture. I think that's what he was referring to. But still, I thought it was interesting comments by Orlovsky. It just reinforces the ineptitude of this franchise, especially right now with just all the bad decisions and poor management and questionable draft picks and all this stuff. So then it begs the question, when are these guys getting out of here? Because I don't know a single soul in Detroit that wants these guys back. Obviously, people are saying, and of course with the news that Bill Bryan is fired after an 0-4 start, maybe some people are like, why don't we just fire him now, just before the bye week? Some people are saying, wait till the end of the season. Others are saying they're going to fire him at the end of next season because that's when everybody's contract is up. So personally, a real football team would probably have fired these guys by now, especially after a 1-3 start. They've already been given 3 years. Bob Quinn has been given 5. This is his 5th season now. A real franchise would have fired him just like they did with Bill O'Brien. However, the Lions are not a real franchise in terms of how real franchises think. So I think, and this is just me going off of what Sheila and the Ford family have done in the past, I think they're going to honor that contract, and they're coming back next season. I really do. And it's really sad, but I think it's the reality because they don't want to have to pay anybody dead money for not being here. If they fire him now, they're going to have all this dead money to pay him, and I don't think that the Fords are into that. So we may have to have one more season of this. I don't know, but I feel like they're coming back. That's just me. I also want to talk about scheme a little bit because I think I have sort of a prediction of why this defense is as bad as it is, and I think a lot of it has to do with scheme. We mentioned at the beginning of the podcast how a lot of these teams in the NFL are separated by good coaching, and the Lions don't have good coaching. We know that. Corey Undlin is a puppet. Matt Patricia is just bad at what he does. They're not getting any pressure on the quarterback whatsoever. They cannot stop the run. They can't cover anybody downfield. Here's what I think is going on. The Lions, as many people know, love to play man coverage. Now, man coverage means that you're just singled up man-to-man receiving. Whereas a lot of teams in the NFL and sort of the trend nowadays is to play more zone coverage. Because of all the passing that's going on, a lot of corners just can't even keep up with the speed that wide receivers have these days. There's very few, very elite cornerbacks in the NFL. So you have to play zone because you have to defend each little area of the field, and it's better just to stay kind of in one area than fly with man-to-man as he goes across the field. That's how teams create mismatches, is really through the man-to-man. And the Lions play man-to-man more than any other team in the NFL. And they're trying to scheme this cover one safety, all man-to-man on all these plays. And they're drafting players, and they're signing players that seemingly that don't fit this cover one scheme. That they're more of maybe like cover 2, cover 3, more zone coverage kind of defenses. A player that I think is a great example, I know he's no longer on the team, but he is one of Bob Quinn's very high second-round picks, was Teez Tabor from Florida, who just sizzled out of the league completely. But you look at him, and some of the reports on him were saying that he was fearing deep speed. He was a very slow corner, playing excessively off of deep coverage, losing footage in coverage. I mean, there were signs here that obviously he was not a man-to-man corner. Even like Will Harris, the safety that they drafted last season out of Boston College, he came in as more of a strong safety, a guy that could kind of play all over the field. And then the Lions use him as a free safety, and he's starting to cover guys. I mean, that's not really necessarily what his strengths were in college. Oh, and then I see a report about Jelani Tavai. I like going through old draft reports. One of the weaknesses is has to stay disciplined to snuff out backside cuts, and he could struggle in pure man coverage. I mean, the writing is right on the wall. You see all these guys, the 3 I just mentioned, they were drafted, and they have a scheme of man, and a lot of these players don't even fit the man coverage scheme based on the weaknesses that these reports came out with. So the writing is on the wall. They're drafting guys that are trying to play, they're trying to fit into their scheme, even though the scheme doesn't really fit these players. And it even reminds me of the comments that Richard Sherman had said in the offseason about how he was offered to play for the Lions, but he said something like, I don't want to play there because of that scheme and that culture. Nobody wants to play in that scheme. And the more I think about it, the more I think he's right. I mean, who would want to play in this scheme if they're not adept to this scheme? Richard Sherman made his money on what he did in Seattle, and Seattle had a very complex, different style of defense. They weren't playing man-to-man all the time. I mean, this was more of like a cover 2, cover 3 specific coverage, whereas the Lions are just playing straight-up man-to-man on a lot of plays. So you can kind of see it on the defense, the scheme-wise. It's not working out. I think it's just time to move on, and I really would like it to be this year, but I'm not sure. It feels like it's going to be next year. I just have a feeling with this ownership, but you never know. I mean, Sheila, she's her own person, but I mean, she is from the same family, so I don't want to get our hopes too high, but I mean, I just see it. I see it 10-25-1 Matt Patricia is now as Detroit Lions head coach. Jim Caldwell had 9 wins just in his last season as Lions coach. Very, very interesting stat, but I think it's time. I think it is officially time to clean house, and we get a whole fresh new start on this Detroit Lions football team.
And joining us now here on Open Mic Night is our good friend. He was on the first ever podcast of Open Mic Night. It is our good friend and Lions guy for Locked On Lions, Mr. Matt Dery. Matt, thank you again for joining us here.
Great to be with you, Noah. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. I'm just very, very upset about this past weekend. Of course, our 1-3 Lions not looking so good, giving up yet another double-digit lead. Matt, what's with all these blown leads? Why are we setting records all of a sudden for double-digit leads blown?
I mean, I think it's a lot of factors, but I think first and foremost, the defense just does not get to the quarterback. And when you have a lead, that should be when whether it's an early lead or a late lead, you're playing with confidence. The other football team is probably going to throw the football. And I think up front, whether it's the run defense or even the pass rush defense, the front four is not good. And it's a problem. It's a problem in many ways. Number one, you spent some high draft picks on some of those defensive linemen, including guys like Deshaun Hand. Of course, Tayshaun Robinson was a high pick. He's gone. And then you spend a lot of money in free agency. Trey Flowers, and I mention this on Locked On Lions every day, and I beat this drum. Trey Flowers, Noah, is making $18 million a year, and you don't hear his name enough. When you're paying a guy that kind of premium cash, he's got a pass rusher, a guy that stops the run. And I the more I watched replay the game last night, the more I just feel like a lot of this sits at the feet of this defensive line. It's really bad. And yesterday you go up 14-0, and ironically enough, the D-line, Danny Shelton, made the play to get the Oruwariye interception to make it 14-0 when Stafford hit Golladay. But then after that, the Saints' offensive line was just destroying the Lions' D-line. And then in some of these blown leads late in games when you got to get a stop and you got to get in the face of the other team's quarterback, not even to sack him per se, but just to bother him, to rattle him, to put a hand in his face, to get up there and force him to make a bad throw. They don't do it. So a lot of this is stemming from a really, really weak defensive line, in my opinion.
Now, by the way, speaking of that defense, there's a lot of people think that we don't have the talent, obviously, defensively, but there's also some people out there that think it's a lot of scheme. The scheme is totally wrong. Do you see anything? Is it a combination of both? Do you think it's one? Do you think it's more talent or more scheme based? So what do you think about that?
Oh, I definitely think it's a combination. I think, if you start with the coaching, I think the Lions made a mistake in hiring Bo Davis to be their D-line coach. He does not have NFL experience. He worked at Alabama, and they plucked him from the college game. He's not getting the job done. The players aren't improving there. And then the scheme, you're right. Yesterday, the 3rd and 5 play to Smith, it was 3rd and 3. There were the 2 third down plays at the end of the game. 3rd and 3, the completion of Smith over Okudah. Again, Breeze had too much time to throw. But again, the Lions only rushed 3 or 4 guys. Then it looked like there was a blitz coming on the pitch play to Kamara, but I just don't know what they're doing. What's the plan? What's the plan for a guy like Jared Davis, who actually graded out, according to Pro Football Focus, pretty well this week? But is he a pass rusher? Is he a blitzer? Is he a middle linebacker? I'm not sure this scheme is working. They're trying all sorts of things, but at the end of the day, after last year's debacle where they couldn't get to the quarterback, now through 4 games, they have 5 sacks. Change something. So that's on the coaches to make that adjustment and say, if we're not getting home with 3 or 4 guys and none of the players that are good enough, then we got to send 5 or 6. And they just don't do it. They won't do it.
I've talked about it on this podcast before about, I think some of this has to do with the ego of the coaches. And we heard about that from our good friend Mike Valeni coming out about how Quinn was really like the only guy in the draft room who really wanted Jeff Okudah. And he said, I'm picking him because, basically I'm the main guy in the room, even though nobody else really seemed to like him. Do you see ego being involved, especially with on the coaching end with Matt Patricia and thinking that he came from this really successful Patriot way? I'm going to do it just like we did there.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a big problem is Matt Patricia is still leaning on the Super Bowl against the Seahawks where he made some great call. And that's a huge call. And as a coordinator, props to him. But the people in Detroit after 3+ years don't care about that. And look, whether Mike Rothstein after the game yesterday is going to ask him hard questions, which Michael did a great job asking him if he's the right guy for the job, and whatever his answers are going to be, that's all media stuff. The bottom line is the record. So whether you are an egomaniac or not, whether or not you think your bleep don't stink, whatever, at the end of the day, it's the record. And I think Matt Patricia was humbled a little bit after last year, and he became more media friendly in the offseason. I like to call it the good guy tour, the GGT on my podcast. Noah, I know you listen, where I said it seemed like he was more likable. The players seemed to like him. He was doing more interviews. He was mic'd up at the Senior Bowl. That's all well and good. But at the end of the day, you got to put your ego aside and go, this isn't working. What can I do to change it? And not think that what you're doing is working or the only way to do it. Very good coaches, great coaches. Bill Walsh, 2 wins his first year, I believe. Jimmy Johnson, I think they went 1-15 when he started the Cowboys up. And he said, you know what? I'm going to scrap a few things that I thought I could bring from college and make some changes and listen to other people. I don't know if the Lions do that.
I want to ask you about these Dan Orlovsky comments. He mentioned that going off of the comments that Matt Patricia said after the game, there's a lot of work that I had to do when I first got here to Detroit. But then he kind of backfired and kind of said, no, there really wasn't a whole lot because the team was already in place with Jim Caldwell. And then all of a sudden, they hired Patricia to increase, but then now they're decreasing. Now they're regressing. So they wanted to take him to the next level, but that's totally backfired. Just what do you have to say about these Dan Orlovsky comments? And for all those people out there that maybe wanted Caldwell to be fired at the time, and now everybody seems to want him back.
Well, I mean, let's talk about this. Number one, Dan Orlovsky was there. His last year with the Lions was I believe when Caldwell arrived, or it was one of Caldwell's. So it was 2016. So Orlovsky did play for Jim Caldwell for 1 year. There's a lot of revisionist history going on here because if you recall, when Jim Caldwell was let go, everybody, including me, was for it. Time to move on. Not a great in-game coach. Yes, the players love him. Yes, he won. But let's stop being 9-7 and eking into the playoffs. And let's get to 10-6 and 11-5 and win some divisions and get closer to a championship. So there's people now that are saying, well, they should have kept Caldwell. Stop with that. But what Orlovsky is saying today is correct. When Caldwell left, there wasn't a lot of the Patricia quote yesterday was, when I got here, we had a lot of work to do. Do I think that's more of a Patricia cliche in the way he talks? Yes. The problem is he said it. And people will play the soundbite. They'll slice it up. They'll dice it up. They'll play it on ESPN. And that's how it comes off. It comes off as Patricia saying, when I got here, I had a lot of work to do. When in reality, I'm not sure that's what Patricia's saying. But Orlovsky saw it, pounced on it, was on ESPN this morning and said, look, he didn't have a lot of work to do. The culture was good and there was plenty of talent there. He came in and changed this whole thing. And Patricia's first season here was an unmitigated disaster. It was worse than last year, even though the record was better. And I'll tell you why. He ticked off a lot of veteran players. He came in and tried to change a culture that didn't need changing. The culture didn't need changing. The win-loss record and the scheme and getting over the hump needed to change. The guys were all together. The guys weren't. A lot of them weren't happy that Caldwell got let go. But if he would have come in and said, "Look, I know you guys love Jim and everything else. We're not going to have to change a lot here. Let me guide you down a different path, but stay on that culture path." And he didn't do that. He came in and just was such a jerk to everybody. And so players remember that stuff. And he ran off a lot of good players. And now those good players would be coming in handy on a team that, again, is 10-25-1 under his watch.
Right now, I feel like the future of the organization kind of depends right now on Sheila Hamm-Ford, the Lions' new owner. Do you think that she's going to think at the end of this season, especially if this keeps going, that they're going to be Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia are going to be gone? Or do you think they're going to sell it to her that, we need another year to kind of, implement our system, even though it's already year 4, talk about, do you think they'll be back next season, or do you think Sheila will pull the plug?
I think it's too early to say. I mean, I think everybody's ready for this to be over. I don't blame anybody for saying it's time to move on after 5 years of one GM and 3 years of one coach that are married together. Remember, they don't have fans in the stands. They're losing revenue, money. There's monies that they are not getting. If the Patricia and Quinn contract extensions are for, let's say, so their contracts are kind of in lockstep. If they both got 5 years, because Quinn signed an extension when Patricia got his contract. Let's say that was in 2018. That was for 5 years each. Are the Fords willing to pay 2021 and 2022, years 4 and 5, to then pay them to be gone and not to work for them, and pay a new GM and a new coach? That's a huge question. Sheila may say to Rod Wood, "Rod, I want these guys out of here. What do I do?" And Rod may say to her, "Sheila, you ready to pay?" I don't know what they're making, but let's say Quinn's making 3 and Patricia's making 2, or who knows, 4 and 3. You willing to eat $14-15 million? She may say, "Oh, geez, that's a lot of money. What kind of revenue we got?" Well, we don't have a ton coming in from fans because there aren't any. I mean, that's a major, major question. And I think she's going to wait till the end of the season. I don't think they're going to do anything in season unless it gets really ugly. But right now, you don't have the fans, Noah, in the stands booing and hissing and going crazy because they're not there. That's a huge break for Patricia. Trust me that he didn't get booed off the field yesterday.
Matt Dery from Locked On Lions with us. I want to ask you more about Matthew Stafford. And I know we text sometimes about him and, obviously one of the most loved or hated athletes in the city of Detroit. Right now, at least what I've seen, and I've talked about this before, there are some times out there where he looks disinterested. He doesn't look like he wants to be there. And I can see the frustration in the press conferences after. And if you remember from Dan Orlovsky's comments in August, talking about how if he doesn't win here, a winner will come and pick him up. Do you think that this possibly could happen maybe at the end of this season if it keeps up?
I don't think he's going anywhere unless he and his wife go to Sheila and Martha and say, "Get us out of here." I think the Lions are extremely married to Stafford. I think the family loves him. I think the family treats him like family. Is he having a great year so far? No, especially with the expectations that came in that he was going to be in the MVP conversation. He's made some poor decisions. You're right. The body language yesterday, I'm not going to go as far as what Justin Rogers tweeted from the Detroit News about him being disinterested, but his body language yesterday was not good. But I don't see them doing this humongous overhaul with Quinn, Patricia, and Stafford all being gone unless they brought in a new GM that said, "I don't like this quarterback. I want him out." I don't see that happening. I don't. I think fans have had enough. I think it's been 12 years. Even the Stafford supporters may say, "Let's let him leave and let him go somewhere else where he can win and take a shot at it." But I'm of the belief that he's going to be here as long as he wants to be here, unless he and Kelly hop in the car, drive down Allen Park, and sit down with Sheila or wherever Sheila's office is and say, "It's time." I think that would be a decision that it would be up to the Staffords. I don't think the Fords are ready to walk away from him anytime soon.
No, I agree with you about that. And I know people that are texting me and saying, it's time to tank for Trevor. We got to tank because we got to get a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that I just see them. I like you said, I see them going with Stafford. But if you were running this franchise and you were able to talk with Stafford, like, would you move on, and would you try to get one of these top quarterbacks, especially if they keep progressing throughout this whole year?
I would get rid of everybody. I think it's time to. I hate having to start over. I don't like rebuilds, but this is not working. And him being here is not the only reason they're losing. There's bigger reasons than Stafford. He's a fine quarterback, but I think it's time. I do. They're going to have to look at this as a business decision. What bigger business decision would you have for next season if fans are going to be in the stands to have a brand new look, new GM, a new coach, and a new quarterback? The quarterback is everything. Now, they have to pick the right one, but if you're looking at season ticket renewals and going, oh, shoot, 35% down, or a lot of people are saying, I'm not coming back there, and then with COVID, I'll wait. I'll get tickets on StubHub. But if you come in with a new regime and a fresh face at QB, whether it's Lawrence Fields or this kid from North Dakota or whatever it is, that will invigorate the fan base and win people back. I think people are just tired of this same old, which is 5 years of Quinn, 3 years of Matty Patty, 12 of that's a long time. I think people are ready for something fresh and new because this isn't working, unfortunately. And I thought it would work. I thought it would be better this year.
I want to ask you one question about the offense before we get to our final question. I just want to know, we obviously see it during the games with this platoon of running backs. On one drive, they'll go with Adrian Peterson. On another drive, they'll go with Kerryon Johnson. It's just, I felt like, especially in yesterday's game where DeAndre Swift arguably played his best game of his short Lions career so far, catching passes over the field, had a touchdown and all that. Why do you think that they're going with this different running backs on each drive kind of thing? Like, shouldn't they just stay hot with whoever the running back is hot during that game? Shouldn't they be doing that instead of switching out all the time?
Oh, especially when you look and say, okay, what did we do? How did we acquire these players? You spent a very high second round pick, the third pick of the second round on DeAndre Swift. You spent a second round pick and traded up to get Kerryon Johnson. You took a flyer on Adrian Peterson for basically nothing, and he's getting the bulk of the carries. That is a talent evaluation. That's a player personnel problem when your scouts, when your staff identify certain players and spend a lot of time, resources, and money on those players. And those guys are backups to a guy that's 35 years old. I like Adrian Peterson. I thought it was a good pickup. But yesterday, he didn't have it. And Swift did. But you're right, Noah, and this is a great observation by you. They almost felt like they had to have a certain plan. Oh, okay, well, Swift's hot right now, but let's give him a blow and put Peterson out there. Why? Here's DeAndre catching it out of the backfield. Tossed sweep. I loved it. Then he's not out there the next series. That's really poor coaching. But again, when you signed Peterson, you probably told him you're going to get a certain amount of touches. And Peterson, I'm sure, is going to Darrell Bevel going, Darrell, remember our days in Minnesota? Get me the rock. Darrell's like, oh, okay, Adrian, whatever you say. It's a problem. It's a definite problem.
Final question here for Matt. Right now, I know it's very hard to be somewhat optimistic about this team, but do you think that there's any hope of salvaging this season, or what do the Lions need to do after this bye week to really get back on the right track and salvage something out of nothing?
Well, here's the thing. Are they getting blown out in every game and just getting destroyed to the point where they're not competitive? No, they're in every game. There is some talent here. I like the offense. I do. I think Hawkinson's coming on. Galladay's a stud. I like Swift. I think the O-line is showing immense improvement. Crosby all of a sudden looks like a serviceable right tackle. Decker's having a nice year. Ragnow's a good football player. So there's actually some material there on the offensive side. I'm not ready to do a dance for the defense yet. And this schedule, Noah, the next few weeks is weak. I mean, you come out of the bye, you have 2 weeks to prepare for Jacksonville. You better win that game. All of a sudden, Minnesota looks beatable. The Bears can't score. You're getting them 3 more times combined. You're playing Houston on Thanksgiving. This thing is salvageable as it sounds, but they got to get it together quick. If the schedule were different, the division was a little bit better, outside of Green Bay, I would tell you, oh, no, there's no chance. But, I still like Minnesota. I don't love them anymore like I did in the early season. I'm not buying this Bears team. Look at the schedule and I say, why not go out and win some of these games? But the defense has to get better, or they won't.
Matt Dery, host of Locked On Lions podcast. Go check it out anywhere that you get your podcasts from. And also, you can follow him on Twitter at Dery Speaks, Dery Speaks. Matt, thank you so much again for being my guest here. And I know we text a lot and all that, but it's just nice that you were able to come on and talk about these Lions.
Oh, no, anytime. Love the work that you're doing over there with John and the crew. Proud of you. One of my former UAD High students, one of the best kids I know. And you're not a kid anymore. You're getting too old for me, buddy. So stop growing up so fast. But thanks for the time.
And I want to thank Matt Dery for joining us here on Open Mic Night. Always great to hear from him. He always has great Lions insight, and I really, really enjoy talking football with my mentor, Mr. Matt Dery. Check out his podcast, of course, Locked On Lions. It's very good. He does it each and every day. It gets a lot of great guests on, and it's awesome to hear, and really happy he was able to come on today. But I really, really hope that the Lions can get it together after this bye week, because their schedule, as he said, it favors them, I think, and especially if they can get things turned around. I'm always a fan of them winning. I don't care as much as I don't like this regime. I always I really want them to win, and because it's just me as a Lions fan, it just makes my Sunday and Monday a lot better. But I do want these guys out. I think it's time. I think what they should do is they should just get Darrell Bevell in as the interim coach. Fire him now. They can just restart, rebrand for next season, have a new GM, new coach, and all that. And so, but I mean, we'll have to see. We'll have to see how different Sheila Hampford is than her mom and her dad, who were owners. So it's her ship now, and we shall see, I guess. But make sure to tune in next week, folks, and check out all the other great content that the Detroit Sports Podcast Network has. A lot of great shows, Doc and Jock, Wrestling Podcast, The Fan Report, Michigan Podcast, all that on Detroit Sports Podcast Network. But thanks again, folks, for tuning in to Open Mic Night.